Hello everyone, my name is Mark Fennell, and today I'm going to talk to you about my upcoming book called Photons in Motion. Photons in Motion. Before we begin, I'm just going to mention that I have my little dog, Jack, in my arms, so you may see him from time to time, or he may pop his head up or some such thing, but he's right down here. Okay, so he likes being in my arms, and I thought this would be good to do since I just felt like it. Okay, to the book Photons in Motion. The Photons in Motion book will be one of my best works because it describes everything regarding photons and their motions. Any number of things. Now, this book was started in 2013 and written 2013, 2014, and a bit of 2015. Now, I had to pause that book to work on other projects, primarily my book on gravity strings. You see, when I'm in describing the motions of photons, there's some elements which require the influence of gravity in a couple of different ways. And I got the basic ideas for those, but I need to refine them and make them more perfected. So I did a lot of research on gravity. I became an expert on everything gravity, from every observation, every equation, every viewpoint. And then I got the intuition in 2014 for gravity strings. Now, the gravity strings is definitely one of my best books and one of my best contributions to humanity, because gravity strings is gravity. It is the physical reality of gravity, which no one else has been able to explain before. It can explain all of Newtonian equations, all of space-time relativity, geometry, equations, and observations. It can explain the atomic orbitals, which people didn't know the reasons why for those orbitals. It explains every observation on Earth and in space regarding gravity. Everything. There's not anything that cannot be explained through the gravity strings. Okay, so originally then this was going to be a 2-chapter item in my book on photons in motion, but I realized this needs to be much greater than that, and so I focused specifically on the gravity strings. And the book is Introduction to Gravity Strings, worked on, published with drawings in 2014. Possibly my greatest book. If I will have, 3 or 4 or 5 greatest books, this is definitely going to be one there. And you should definitely buy it and read it, because it is gravity. It solves what humanity could not solve for 10,000 years. So once that was completed, then the other projects came. For example, the understanding of redshift, which I published and put out. Of course, I've got my inventions for flight control systems, which I think need to get out right away. Books on motion, new understanding of motion, many things. So now, with all that, some of it has to be background, or they're related to photons in motion. Now we can get back to the actual book, Photons in Motion. So while the work, the main discoveries in writing are still good, I've got to come back to it and refresh my mind. What have I written? What do I want to write? At this point, how do I want to revise my writings and make the book. Okay. I'm hoping to get this book finished by November of this year. That's my goal. So what does Photons in Motion cover? Everything. Pretty much everything. And there are things that are completely new to science. People couldn't understand, but I've got it. So, for example, what is the structure of a photon? I'll tell you. I'll show you. Why does the photon travel so fast? Why do all photons travel at the same speed and never deviate from that speed? I show you that in this book. Then there's the frequency. What specifically causes the frequency of a photon, of electromagnetic energy? What causes the frequency? I show you. How does the frequency vary? I show you. How does the energy of the electromagnetic energies create the pulsation frequency and the specific energy amount translate into the specific frequency? I show you. Amplitude. Amplitude is another measurement of energy. So how is it that a photon can have, for example, you can have photons with the same frequency but different amplitude? What does that mean on a physical level? We've got a microscope. What does that mean? I show you. I show you how the energy is put into place, which causes the frequency and the amplitude variations. So all that. Then, of course, is the particle-wave duality. I solved this back in 2013. I've published it in a couple of other books and articles. It still hasn't gotten mainstream attention yet. Otherwise, people would have said it's been solved. Because it has been solved, you just haven't noticed it yet. But in any case, those actually early versions are actually simpler versions of the more detailed cause. So the particle-wave duality. How can electromagnetic energy be a particle and a wave? I show you in great detail. I show the pictures. And actually, what's beautiful is it only requires one page. One single page of pictures will show you particle-wave duality. That's it. And then other chapters will show you the further details of how that comes about. Okay, so you get the basic ideas in just one picture, one page, and the other chapters are details of that. So particle-wave duality. Okay. So photons in motion. You got what people couldn't solve before, which is why the constant speed of light, why light travels so fast, what does frequency mean, what does amplitude mean, how does energy translate into frequency, how does energy translate into amplitude, and how does electromagnetic energy have both particle and wave characteristics at the same time. I'll show you all this. But there are other motions as well you need to understand. For example, there's a classic spread of electromagnetic energy. When electromagnetic energy is emitted, it comes in bursts, and that burst over time spreads out. I like to give the analogy of a pizza dough. It starts as a large pizza dough, but then you roll it out and it becomes flatter and flatter and flatter and thinner and thinner and thinner. And if you roll that out really thin, they got holes in between. So that's exactly what happens with the clump, the cluster of photons. As they travel through space, they spread apart. Okay? So that is another type of motion. The individual photons are separating from each other. And it's been calculated at a very specific rate, which they call the inverse square law. Now, why is that? I show you exactly why that is. And that has to relate to the structure of the photon clump, the internal energy of the Well, first of all, it's a photon clump, the gravity strings which hold the photons together, and then the energies of the photons which separate as they go forward. And if you understand those structures, it's the structures and the specific energies of holding versus going, you'll understand why they separate and why they separate in even distribution like that. Okay? That's another photons in motion. Then we have the classic light bending and black holes. Okay? I actually explained this already in my gravity strings book. Near the end of the chapters, I go through some details of that. But I get more into it because the structure of the photon is more clearly laid out. So first of all, I'm going to tell you that the Einstein's relativity was not proven during that eclipse. That did not prove Einstein's theory of relativity at all. All it proved was that the sun does indeed have enough gravity to alter the course of photons. It did not prove relativity caused it. It does not prove those equations. Newton's equations will work just fine. Okay, so it's to get clear on that. But what happens basically is that when the photon comes close to the sun, the gravity between the photons and the sun causes the photon to bend towards the sun. All right. Now there are three choices. Either A, the photon is pulled in by the sun, pulled in by the star, and that becomes the dark star, the black hole. Or B, the energies are equal and the photon continuously orbits the star. In which case every star does have photons which orbit it. We just can't see them because they're orbiting. Or third, it bends in a little bit, but the photons don't have enough energy to break away. And that's where the light bending comes in. Anyway, I showed that in the Gravity Strings book, and I'll show that more again in this Photons in Motion book. I'm also going to cover a little bit about FM radio, because I have some insights on the way FM radio works that no one else has. Eventually I'm going to write some other books on radio transmission, but that's going to be far in the future. Radio transmission with a new understanding of photons. But basically, with the photons in motion, the photons, it's well known that there's a carrier wave and a signal wave. But I'm going to show you physically how those objects actually move together, how they're combined, how they travel together, and how they separate. So I'll show you that in the book as well. So there's a lot that I'm going to put into this next book. I would say 80% has already been written back in 2013, 2014, and I'm just going to need to go back and do some revisions, look at the whole thing and put it together, and you will see that. Again, there's not just one puzzle that's been solved, but many. There have been many puzzles that are solved and presented for the first time in this book. Yeah. So it's gonna be one of my best. Definitely one of my best works in terms of information for advancement of science. So I think that's all I've got to say about that. Right, Jack? He's comfy in my arms.